Thanks, Cody. Thanks, everybody at Creative Mornings, and I'm really honored to be here with you all this morning. This is a true pleasure for me to be in this space, this wonderful space, with you all this morning. I see so many people that I recognize, so hello to you all, and I hope that you can take away a little bit about myself and a little bit about the organization that I work for here in Chattanooga. So preserve. I hope that this morning you'll hear a little bit about my thinking about what we want to preserve in Chattanooga. First and foremost, thank you to everybody involved in making this happen, and I'm really honored to be here today. Here are a few of our banners if you want a hashtag or a shout out to the studio while you're here today. Can anybody recognize what state this flag is attributed to? Excellent, sir. Excellent, thank you. Aggie, wonderful. So I'm from Maryland, and I do consider myself a Southerner, and I'll tell you why. It's kind of interesting. I say Lafayette, although I think a lot of people here say Lafayette, and so before you call me a Yankee and start all of that business, I just want to remind you as a technicality, Maryland is just below the Mason-Dixon line, right? So that was the dividing line between the North and South. We were just below that. So technically, I am a Southerner, somewhat proud of that in some ways. But I'll talk to you a little bit about that today. I believe that I really became a Southerner when I had my wife's grandmother's fig preserves, which you can't see here on the left, but the fig preserves, raise your hand for fig preserves. Oh, yeah, what an amazing treat, a Southern treat. I didn't discover that until I moved here 25 years ago. I'm a big fan of the Preservation Hall Jazz Band. I think that they are truly a cultural identity of New Orleans, and I think they're a cultural identity of the South that needs to be preserved. And lastly, I'm an architect, so I know a little bit about wood preservation. This morning, what I want to talk about is how can we decide together as a community what we want to preserve when change is inevitable, right? Change in your communities day after day is inevitable. Individually, collectively, we change our communities for the better or for the worse, right? How can we collectively decide what we want to preserve? And so I hope you hear today, I hope that you hear that at the Chattanooga Design Studio, we consider three larger components of our community as essential to preservation. The first of which is preservation of land and our scenic beauty surrounding our city for outdoor recreation. We're known about this across the nation, and so it's important for us to preserve that. It's important for us to preserve that for our future generations. It's important for us to preserve our neighborhoods for everyone, and our neighborhoods as their historic value and their value to our community as a whole. And it's important for us to preserve planning for people first, right? So those three large buckets. You know, day after day, it's hard to see ourselves individually in the change in our communities. It's really difficult to see what in the world we'd want to preserve when everything that seems to be planned, seems to be built, seems to be designed, seems to be thought about is thought about by the car and thought about unintentionally. Millions and millions of dollars every day spent on behalf of an automobile. We're so addicted to this machine. We're so addicted that we're gobbling up farmland faster than any other country in the world. About 1.5 million acres of land a year is estimated by the Farmland Trust. About 2,500 acres a day of land is gobbled up of national prime farmland, really at the expense of this pattern of development. And so day after day, we need to question ourselves, how can we preserve our scenic beauty? How can we change this pattern? How can we really, really think deeply about the way in which we're building our communities differently and less about gobbling up farmland for development patterns? The good news is that the Chattanooga Design Studio has a legacy here in the city that is about 40 years, 4 decades in the making of reinvesting in the city, reinvesting in neighborhoods proximate to downtown, and downtown as a neighborhood in itself, and preserving that land for people rather than the land outside of our communities that we need to have for recreation, for our outdoor enjoyment, and for scenic beauty, and just preserving nature. In 2017, the Chattanooga Design Studio led an effort for about a 400-acre district in the South Broad area, just south of US 24. And we led that as a community design effort to illustrate to our community, first and foremost, a citizen-led effort with citizen-led input, but to illustrate how we could reinvest in that neighborhood, infill within that neighborhood, and revitalize that neighborhood, which is 400 acres of real estate that is available to us today. This neighborhood includes the the Wheeling Foundry site and the U.S. Pipe site. This process was led, as I mentioned to you, as a citizen-led process. We had 2 very large community visioning workshops with over 100 people participating at each visioning workshop. Most of them local residents, most of them from surrounding neighborhoods. We collected thousands and thousands of comments, and what I'm really proud of for our community is that the overarching comment that was reoccurring was that our community wanted this neighborhood, this 400-acre neighborhood, to be preserved for mixed income, mixed use, mixed race housing, mixed communities, and to be connected with Howard High School, to be connected with the Southside Gardens, and to be connected with the former Foundry site. That's what our community said. And so we set forth to create a vision, an inspirational vision. This is not a regulatory vision. This is an inspiration about how we could achieve that. So you see in front of you the illustrative plan that we created as an inspiration to guide us through the next decades of reimagining this district and reimagining how we could infill those neighborhoods and reinvest in those neighborhoods so that they can be the most vibrant neighborhoods proximate to our downtown. I'm very proud of this plan because we also illustrated how we could achieve, you see here on the right-hand side of the screen, Howard High School, a former neighborhood park called Harris Johnson Park, reimagined. Up on the upper right-hand side of the screen, you see Mary Walker Towers, which is Section 8 affordable housing preserved in that neighborhood, right next to a neighborhood park. So utilizing community design tools to help us understand how all of these pieces fit within the design of quality neighborhoods and quality placemaking. So this is really good infill, right? This is what we're talking about. Yeah, so this next segment of what I want to talk about is neighborhood infill and neighborhood preservation. And I think we really need to have a very serious conversation about this. We're seeing historic neighborhoods in Chattanooga being ravaged by inappropriate infill. Probably the family on the left had a conversation with the family on the right and said, "You should just be happy. I'm improving your property values. Look at our house. I mean, we got this out of Home Plans Online, and we're really happy to be a part of your neighborhood." And the guys on the right still aren't very happy about their neighborhood and their new neighbors. So we need to figure out how to be more neighborly about the way in which we reinvest in these historic neighborhoods. This is a really difficult image to see, but the highlighted areas that you see on the map, if you turn downtown, if north is to the left of the screen and downtown is in the middle, sort of right here, that's downtown proper. We have thousands of acres surrounding our downtown, historic neighborhoods that are all in these highlighted areas what I would consider porch front character. That's that traditional southern porch front single family home character. Those streets look like that, and it's street after street of wonderful historic neighborhoods. And so it's important for us to recognize that character, preserve that for future generations. So we created an online resource. This is what that character looks like in our communities. We need to understand the importance of that resource in the public realm, those streets that we share, from your porch to my neighbor's porch across the street. We all share that. Those are our living rooms that we all share. It's important that we build that in a neighborly manner. We created this online resource. It's a pattern book, but it's an online resource called mychathouse.com, mychathouse.com. And the resource is intended to provide tools to residents, homeowners, home builders about how to do this stuff in a neighborly manner, about how to infill, and what, more importantly, what the public realm means from a neighborhood structure. We created this content in a very personal manner. So if you go to the website today, you'll see the content organized in this manner: my neighborhood, my street, my house, my yard. And the reason that we did that is to instill the individual pride and the individual responsibility that's necessary in building our neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods are a collective of individual decisions, truly, and they're made up by that every single day. And so your decision as a neighbor to build in a properly manner, a respectful manner, is important. The resource even includes what I call hackable or downloadable house plans. We said, let's just admit what happens in Chattanooga. Everybody steals a home plan from somewhere else and just goes and builds that. Let's create some urban housing prototypes that fit into these neighborhoods, that respect the character of these neighborhoods, and make that open source. I'm proud to say we have 24 home plans that you can download in a PDF. You get the elevation, you get the floor plans. Go give that to a builder today and make that available. And they're everything from a 900 square foot house, super affordable 900 square foot house, to about a 1,500 square foot house. So we also have been an advocate for understanding neighborhood structure within our urban neighborhoods. We've been in the conversation about missing middle housing. This is this housing that, if you look at the diagram on the right, which illustrates sort of neighborhood structure in typologies of housing, this mix of housing, on the right you might imagine, let's just say, Bailey Avenue running. And the character of Bailey Avenue, we would expect over the long term to return to something that's more higher intensity, maybe even mixed use, which apartments over retail or something like that, or just a larger structure. And then on the far left, single-family homes. And so the question is, how do we feather between the two of those? How do we transition that scale of housing and that scale of intervention? And what we're missing in Chattanooga, what we've torn down, are a lot of these 4-plexes, 6-plexes, 8-plexes that used to really be a good mitigator between these two scales. And it's going to be important for us to, as we understand neighborhoods as places that support transit long-term, as we densify our neighborhoods and include more housing options, that we find different types of housing options. So we've been an advocate for that effort here in Chattanooga. So lastly, today, I want to ask you, how can we preserve all of this decision-making, all of this planning for human beings first? As I mentioned at the beginning, much of our planning today happens at the speed of the car, 45 miles an hour, planning for the 45-mile-an-hour life. But every single one of you today, you don't experience life like that. And the important thing that I want you to remember is that we share more in common with one another as human beings at the 3-mile-an-hour scale, at that scale of our life, than we do at the automobile scale. We have more that binds us in common at the human scale than at the automobile scale. The wonderful thing here to say is that, once again, we as human beings have a wonderful start of this. We have tens of thousands of years of building cities at the human scale, at the scale of the beast of burden or a ox cart at the 3-mile-an-hour scale. And we built wonderful places because of that. We built wonderful places like this at that scale. We're not doing that anymore, and we're not building those places for human beings. We're building this. We're subservient to our car. We're building places, really, that, to me, there aren't enough antidepressants in the world to make this a happy place. There just aren't. You know why? I think you're getting the picture here, is that everything has been subservient to either a transaction or a car and a transaction. We forget the fact that the human being behind the wheel is the person that we're trying to get to make the transaction. We've forgotten all of that in this. And so, once again, the good news is we have here in Chattanooga been on a trajectory to change this. I'm very proud of, this is one of my favorite public spaces in Chattanooga. It's the Passage. Raise your hand if you've been there and enjoyed this public space. Fantastic. You know, it's a found space. Not many Chattanoogans know about it. Here's the reason why I love this space, right? First and foremost, you know, American white colonizers have done a terrible job at place preservation. Terrible. Let's just admit it. Terrible. This space recognizes the loss of an entire culture in our community. It recognizes through public art, the Cherokee Nation, through a public art project. But you may happen upon this space one day and never know that. But you may happen upon it the next day and be educated about Cherokee life through art, and what what their symbols mean to their culture. And it's important that we do that. It's important that we recognize a space. And this isn't being done in every American city, taking on the most challenging parts of your culture and making that public art. Most people in America these days are talking about placemaking by saying, what are your assets? And let's reinforce that. The Trail of Tears was not an asset, at all. But the Cherokee culture was an asset, right? It was an asset to a community at one time. And so we really recognize that this is a fantastic public space. You know, we're also doing a much better job, I think, over the years at understanding what our public life means. Public life is that time when you decide to get out of your offices, you get out of your homes, you step out of your car, and you enjoy a space like this with other human beings. We're doing a much better job of understanding that and understanding how to enrich that. I want to share with you about how the studio is working on that for you. In early 2017, we joined with the Enterprise Center to begin to think about launching into a program called the Public Realm Action Plan for the Innovation District. That's primarily about a 10 square block geographic footprint within the city center. You know, we had seen so many good things happening over recent years with Miller Parks opening, the planning for Patton Parkway. We want to ask ourselves the question, how can we continue to enliven our public spaces for human beings? How can we continue to involve citizens in the making of these public spaces? And this is really setting forth a new way of achieving that. The method is to observe people first through data. Last fall, we had over 60 volunteers. Raise your hand if you volunteered. Matt Busby, you volunteered, yes. Thank you for doing that. We used observational data to understand where people are doing what they're doing in the public realm with their public life, right? Primarily, where are people moving and where are people staying? And by recording those observations, we can use that data to reinforce where human beings are already using our public realm in our downtown. So people staying and people moving, and what they're doing while they're staying, what the activity is, what the group size is, the age and gender of who is here. This tells us a lot about who is present or who is not present in our downtown. And what we found is that this data showed that 4 in 5 people within that district, within the Market Street area, are staying and waiting on transit, right? 4 in 5 people are waiting on transit in this district. And so we asked ourselves a question, how can we improve this public space for the people that need it the most? How can we take what might be the most dreary part or the most stressful part of somebody's day and make it a more enjoyable part of their day? And so we asked ourselves, what would the metrics be if we started piloting maybe a prototype of design ideas, hack a bus stop, and see what people respond to? Let's not go build the big $2 million project and hope that we get it right for everyone. Let's just take it apart piece by piece and put it back together for humans and see what works, see what doesn't work, and get feedback real time while people are using that space. And so that's the program that we're launching on. We, in partnership with Carter and the Enterprise Center, have established some metrics by which we will measure success. And I'm proud to say that this summer, our entire internship program with students from local universities, and Stephanie, who's here from the UTC Graphic Design Department, will lead a process with a local artist to find out how we can imagine these spaces as better spaces for transit. And so this is very important, and this very important work. We will work with Carta to make some transitional changes. They'll be incremental, and then we'll test and we'll pilot and observe again. We'll make some more changes, we'll test, we'll pilot and observe again. Again, to avoid needless dollars spent where people are not going to use it and it's not going to benefit their life. And so it's here that I close with what I want to challenge you with, and what we challenge ourselves with at Studio, is to fundamentally, at the root, I gave you a pretty deep conversation about the studio, talking about preservation at a deeper level. Please engage with our programs, please engage with our website, and make sure that you engage with us. I want to challenge you as we depart this morning to examine the share that you have, examine the share that you've been given, and examine the share that you want to pass on to future generations. If we do that as designers, as creatives, I think that we'll all find fundamentally our places are better when we're together. And thank you very much.